Welcome to Bigger Than the Game with Jeremy and Jose. I'm Jeremy Dove. I'm joined by the man, the myth, the legend, hardest working man in show business, Mr. Jose Ruiz. What's going on, man?
What's going on, Jeremy Dove? How you doing, man?
I'm good, man. How you doing? You come fresh off of vacation?
I know, man. I know. I threw the show off a little bit, and I apologize, man,
No,
to
that's all
to
good.
all the listeners and stuff, man. Nah, it was really nice, man. And if you're not from the area, Ocean City, Maryland's a beautiful place. If you ever get a chance, check it out. I know you've been there, but for any of our listeners or folks that follow us on YouTube, it's a beautiful, beautiful town. It's a lot to do. Great food. It was awesome. Thank you.
So Jose's, rested and ready to
I'm back.
go.
Yeah, tanned up. You know
That's
what I mean?
right.
Like, I'm ready to go.
So we had Jeter, the captain, the
The
docu
captain.
series episodes 3 and 4 dropped last week, and we're doing the recaps on them and what we think about them. So we're doing this one episode, looking at episodes 3 and 4. And Jose, so we got to the middle, the middle chunk of this thing, which I think
Yeah.
really, I mean, you play the whole thing out through to see if you like the whole docu series, but that middle chunk is where I feel like you either lose people or you keep it going.
Right.
So for you, when you watch episodes, we'll make it generic before we break it all down into 3 and 4. But like generically, these two episodes, does it still have you? Or are you still like you're still doing pretty good with it, or are you starting to kind of be like you got some problems?
No, it's got me. I'll say that for sure. And I know in our last episode, I was kind of jetered out. I was saying that these two episodes actually kind of like brought me back a little bit. I'll be honest. And it wasn't. Obviously, the docu series is on Derek Jeter. Like, so I knew that's all we were going to get. But it's like the commercials. You know what I mean? Like all that stuff on top of it. But these last two episodes were I thought were really good, and it was just, and I knew we were talking about it, the other show, our previous episode, like what we think they're going to get into. We talked about like the Red Sox. You knew that was coming, the A-Rod stuff. You knew that was coming, and it was just really in the 9/11 stuff we talked about. We knew that was coming, so it was just really cool to see all of that. And but I really enjoyed them. What about you, Darren?
I think so. I think they've continued to have me interested and hooked. And like
Right,
you said, it is about Jeter and it's through his quote unquote perspective. But it's kind of been nice to. It's a team I couldn't stand. I couldn't stand
right,
the '90s Yankees, but as time goes, you learn to appreciate greatness, even if it's not for the team that you're rooting for. So it's cool, and I felt like they, even though I could listen to the New York media back then, I felt like a lot of stuff outside of Steinbrenner talking, a lot of these a lot of stuff was felt very close. Like you didn't get the inside scoop because they kind of kept it like the Yankee way and it stays in house. So it's good to hear perspective on these guys who I felt like you had a few guys, like David Wells could talk and stuff like that, but I felt like Steinbrenner did all the talking and the media kind of were swirling about who's getting
right.
fired or who's they're bringing in, who's getting traded. But it's cool to hear these players' perspectives on what was going on in, that clubhouse doing that dynasty. So, and I will say this real quick too. I feel like at least in episode 3, Jeter talked a little bit more. That's the most I feel like he kind of showed a little bit about himself. It still was, he still is, obviously, you can see he's guarded, but
Yeah,
I felt
yeah.
like he at least talked about why he's guarded. He got a little more insight. So I like that in episode 3. So I'm with you. It still has me hooked, but it still is. It's like Jeter, but it's kind of like the '90s Yankees documentary so far. Honestly, these first 4 episodes.
Yeah, it's the total opposite of the Last Dance.
Mm-hmm.
After episode 4, I think the Last Dance, we've talked about it during our episodes, our recaps here. The first 4 episodes were great, and then after that, it just became the Michael Jordan show, which I was cool with, but I know other people wanted to kind of like it be more about the '98 season. But what your first point where you have other players, kind of on here. The one player who's really surprising me is David Cohn. He's been great on these shows, and he's on these episodes, and he's really given like really good insight, and so he's been a kind of like a surprise for me. And but you talked about like that Yankee way, and like you can even like I think what's I'm drawing a blank. The commentator guy's name,
Michael K.
Michael K. I can't stand him. Like he's and he's like stamping that during these episodes. But yeah, I'm enjoying a lot of these players coming on. It's players I haven't seen in a while, and I agree. Like I didn't really have that Yankee hate, but I really respect this team now. Like you know what I mean. Looking back and seeing what they did, they were and I will get into this, but there was a couple like the playoff series that I kind of forgot about, and they were kind of talking about them, bringing them back to light, and I was just like, man, I forgot how great that series was. And again, we'll get into that, but these last two episodes, especially episode 4, did that for me.
Yeah, and I say for me that the hate was because, and you kind of got it from the earlier episodes where, for me, growing up in the 90s, the Yankees were kind of like forgotten about unless you were like us, like you loved the history. So hearing about Ruth, Gehrig, DiMaggio, Mantle, the Yankees in the early first part of that decade were like a forgotten brand.
Yeah.
And then to me, to go from 0 to 1,000, where to be like, oh, like that was a has-been brand. The Mets felt more popular earlier in the 90s, honestly, than the Yankees. To then they were just everywhere, in your face, and Yankee memorabilia everywhere. That's where it was like, for me, looking back now, it was like, wait a minute now, like a few years ago, no one cared. Now everyone got Yankees hats, and they're in different colors, and they're everywhere, and Jeter this and that, and they're on Seinfeld and all these it was like a lot. Like, so that to me is where the dislike comes from. I'm looking at episodes 3 and 4, and one thing for me that maybe I kind of feel stupid on, like I'll be honest, and maybe I don't know if it's just me or not. How big of a part A-Rod is playing in all this,
dude?
Is like
I'm right there with
me.
you.
Okay.
I'm right there with you. No. I'm right there with you. So I was saying that I put it down on my notes. It was this Jeter A-Rod thing was huge. Like you know what I mean? Like because for me, the outside looking in, I didn't think it was that big. Like I knew, and we talked about it on our last episode. Like the 3 shortstops with Jeter, A-Rod, and Nomar. I knew that was like a thing. Like I got that. Like, all right, who's the best shortstop in the American League or in the league? I get it. But this Jeter A-Rod thing was really, really big, and I feel like I was like left out in it.
Yeah.
But I'm with you, man.
Like to me, I remember it being a big deal when he signed, because it was like, okay, now he's got to move to third, and is he going to stay at third or what? So when he signed and them two coming together, that I totally remember being a big deal. But this whole thing, like the beef, like I thought it would be. I think in our episode 1 recap, I thought the front office would be the villain, like the Jerry Krause, like what he was for The Last Dance. I'm like, is it A-Rod? A-Rod's like the villain.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, I'm like, A-Rod so far is like the kind of like the villain, like to open episode 3 with like, I did not know that they had the audio transcript.
Ooh, that was good.
Of that interview. So I'm like, that's good too, because honestly, and A-Rod has grown on me in his post baseball career, but I'm like, you can't weasel out of it though. That's what I'm thinking. Like,
he's trying.
Yeah, he's trying, but well, tell me in what way you think he's trying.
Well, I just think that, the way he's kind of like trying to deflect it. It was one, I can't remember what they were talking about, but he was like, I didn't grow up with a father. And I was like, come on, A-Rod, like, where are you going with this? Like, stop. Like, just stop right now. Like, you were talking your shit. That's fine. Like, just own it. It was 20 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, you're good. Like, just own it and just move on. Like, but no, he brought that into play. It was just, I just thought that particular one was super weird, and I didn't get it. But he's trying to slide out. He's still looking pretty good.
Yeah, and I think to Jeter's credit, which is classic Derek Jeter. He's a classy guy. He's not bashing him, but in his own way, he's saying that he was hurt and a friendship was broken. And and I don't know. Maybe we'll see with the future episodes if he's going to say like they became okay again because they did wind up winning a championship together, and they were teammates for a while. But you can kind of tell like he looks at him. He looks at him different, and I don't think he'll ever look at him the way he did back 20 to 25 years ago. You know, he just won't.
And I even think he was setting that up by opening the episode talking about how important trust was, and you know, like, because at first I was like, well, isn't that like everyone? Like, you know what I mean? Like, isn't trust important to all of us? But you know, for some people, it's really important. I know for me, it's you know, you do one thing, and I'm not saying I'm like Derek Jeter, but like you do something, I'm not going to forget that. You know what I mean? Like, and you know, I think he opened up. I think they opened up that episode with that because again, like they were just trying to say like A-Rod broke that trust and it's done now. You know what I mean? Like they can be acquaintances, they can be cool, but they were spending nights at each other's places. You know what I mean? Like that was more than a friendship. Like them guys were like super close, man. And because again, like there wasn't too many people that can relate to either one except each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just like I get where that friendship can start like that. But yeah, A-Rod did him dirty. You know what I mean? And even like, not that he did him dirty, but like, because the stuff he was saying is true. Like, you know what I mean? So that's why I'm like, dude, just own it and then you're good. Like, you know, because what you're saying, we were saying is on these first two episodes where it's like Jeter was put in a position where he can be great, but he wasn't as good as A-Rod. You know what I mean? We all knew that. Just, you said it, just own it, dude.
And I think he messed up, and him trying to flip it because there's like it's not bad at first when you read, or at least like the transcript that we're getting from the documentary. At first, it's like okay, it's not bad. He's like, there's no rivalry, and it's almost like kind of diabolical, maybe if you look at it, because he's like, I have a brother, and there's a rivalry, but with Derek, there's no rivalry. Like we're brothers, we're tight. And then he sets it up where he doesn't have to lead. And it's like, you don't got to say that. Like,
Right.
there's ways to say it even without saying it. And, you know, he could have just said, like, there's no rivalry, and I'm happy for Derek's success, and he has a great team around him. You know, he's part of a great dynasty. And even then, you got to say, like, if I had that, you know, you just coded, like, if I had that stuff, I would, you know, have championships too and all these things. But you don't have to do. So he just went too direct with the whole, he's not a leader, and then he's like, you don't really fear. Then like the line that really does is, you don't fear Derek, you're fearing Bernie and O'Neill.
Yeah,
that's where it's like you can't come back from that.
Nah. No, because the leader part was probably the most false thing that he could have said. You know, because that's where he really excelled at. Now with the fearing him, I agree. I don't think pitchers or teams went in there like, oh, we got to make sure we get Derek Jeter out. Like, no, like it was more of Bernie Williams, Paul O'Neill, all these other guys, all these power hitters.
Tino, you know.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and so I'm cool with that. I'm cool with him saying that. But then when he started like kind of like shitting on his leadership and all that, and look, maybe he's trying to say, look, he walked in there was a team, there was a bunch of veterans in there, he can kind of fall back. But we all know that's something that like, at least I'll give Jeter that. From very early on, he was a leader in that clubhouse. Him saying that just to me looked like a hater all the way. You know what I mean? Like each category, he was just hating on him, and you can't do that.
And it's messed up. Like you said, like outside of the leadership comment, which I agree with you. That's one thing Derek showed. He showed by example. He showed by, you know, being an encourager. He was a leader at a very young age. So like I give him that. So A-Rod, that's a false thing, but I just don't. I wonder what the motivation is, because especially around that time, I get it. When he was in Seattle, guys like us, the conversation was there. He was a young star, but that West Coast bias of Seattle versus New York, I think it's gone down. I think it's still there, but it's way less now than it was back in the day, late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah. You really were kind of missing out if you were in the West Coast. You know, that East Coast bias was strong. But what gets me, though, is from everything I remember, that article came out when he signed that contract, which was like, that was the biggest deal ever. Like that 200, I can't forget the numbers. 252 because that was the standard in sports for a long time.
For a long time.
Like,
it's like
A-Rod
there's a couple
money.
contracts that stick out. It's like
Yeah.
KG's,
Yep.
A-Rod's, you know what I mean? Like this Harper deal when he got, you know, it was like the first $300 million. I was like, what? Like,
Yeah.
There's a couple of them. That one, you're right. I'm not going to forget either.
No, it's like that. Like, I remember that broke everything on Sports Center. So to me, it's like you have the money, and at this point, you're getting that star factor because everyone's talking about you. So there was that insecurity in that thing that he was focused on. Why is Derek getting talked about? Like, but to me, I'm like, that's where his ego is big. It wasn't like a couple years before where it's like he's in Seattle. You are the guy everyone's talking about right now.
Right.
Be happy with that.
Yeah, bigger market in Texas. You know, he was the guy. Like, you're right. Like, it was just he was at that point the best player in the league. We all knew that. You know, he was paid. You know, he was the top athlete in sports. You know, the way he was getting paid. So you're right, and he was getting all that marketing and all that stuff because again, like he is the top guy in baseball. But the problem is this guy in New York is winning championships and everybody loves him and they're all talking about him and he couldn't take it, which I can understand. Like that would probably bother me too. If I'm the best player in the league and there's one guy who I don't think is as good as me, he's a good player, but I don't think he's as good as me. And I'm going to let people know every chance I get. And that interview, it was bad. You know what I mean? Like it was bad. It was a bad look for him.
It really was. Now, in episode 3, also, there's a few things that I liked that were interesting. I'm a little surprised that, not that they mentioned Roger Clemens, but it's almost like that he's in it. That was like weird to see him. He's holding a baseball.
I know. It was like a menacing looking kind of thing too. He's like in a dark, like, you know what I mean? It was weird.
He did not look good. Like he looked. You know, I'm a thick dude, but he looked like bloated and just like with the hat on. Like he just didn't look comfortable in front of the camera.
Yeah.
Like it was weird, but it was also like he kind of got more attention than I thought. Like they focused on Roger more, and I'm like,
yeah, he got a nice chunk in there.
Was he that big a part of like Jeter's career? Like, you know, it's like weird, like who they're picking to like talk about in a way. Because I'm like Roger Clemens, like. The fact that they brought him in, it was like, oh yeah. And the fact that like, all right, like I remember Roger buzzed. He pitched inside. He was a brushback guy. I remember him buzzing and hitting Jeter. I remember Strawberry wanting to come after him. I remember that. But then like to me, like that was pretty much should have been it. But like he got like more run. Yeah. And then Jeter talking about like loved him as a teammate. I'm like, okay, like it was very interesting.
It was interesting, and then it turned into from that to like. Clemens versus Pedro, you know what I mean? At one point, which was cool. Like I enjoyed watching that, but yeah, I was surprised he was on there too. You know, because again, like I felt like that Roger Clemens trade was kind of the start of, you know, the Yankees buying these championships at this point.
For sure.
You know, they still had their core guys, right? Those young guys that they brought up, and they still had those veteran players on the team like Strawberry and all that. But you know, at that point, it was just like, all right. Like, we're going to start buying these championships and signing all these players because we can do that because we have all the money. I did like the fact that they kind of went into, like, that, like, Clemens Jeter thing and how he was, like, buzzing Jeter all the time. He hit him and almost broke his hand or whatever it was. And it was a cool story, like, that first batting practice. Jeter came out with all, like, the catcher's gear and, like, to kind of, like, squash that thing because there was some tension there, apparently. You know, between the two, and folks in the team were like not sure how that was going to mesh and all that. So that I did like that, how kind of like Jeter approached it and was just like, look, like this is cool, we're good, you know what I mean? And how he kind of talked about how Clemens was a great teammate, which I was surprised in hearing that.
I almost feel like, was it a setup thing, like the contrast or like to be like, hey, I can adjust to anybody, you know, like Clemens and A-Rod, like, you know, hey, I had problems with Clemens, but he was a good teammate. And then, like, A-Rod is A-Rod. Like, I kind of just wondered because, like, I'm like, is really Clemens that big a part of your, like, is that one of your boys from the team? Like, you know, I always wonder that in dynamics anywhere. Like, who's like really like they had that brotherhood or they were that tight, and who was like they didn't get along, or who were like we worked together, we got the job done, but we went separate ways. I'm always into that. So I'm like, were
Yeah.
Jeter and Roger like tighter than that? Like they had a brotherhood more? So
I
always
don't see that.
fascinates me.
I don't see that because, and again, this is from super outside looking in, but you can see that the Posada relationship, the Mariano Rivera relationship, you know what I mean? Like you can see those, and you can see how tight that is. If before this episode, and I get they were talking about pre Roger Clemens, but you didn't hear the name. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't know if we're going to hear the name afterwards. Unless when he leaves or whatever the Yankees, but. I don't get that sense. You know what I mean? Like, because it's either Chad Curtis, right? It's like Chad Curtis, Roger Clemens, and then Posada, like that beautiful relationship. And I felt like that was like almost force fed to us. Like it was just like, no, Clemens is a good dude. Like here, this is Jeter telling you that.
Let me ask you. You brought him up, Chad Curtis. So they show that brawl which I vividly remember too. People did talk about Jeter and A-Rod, the Yankees Mariners brawl. It was it was a big one.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like just like the pushing. There were some haymakers thrown in that brawl, and like it was controversial because Jeter and A-Rod. Now it wasn't in the midst of it, but it was toward the end. But they were kind of laughing and joking on the outside. And to Jeter's point on this. And I remember that. It wasn't in the midst of it all they were doing it.
Right.
But it was like when it was players were going back to their dugouts, they were talking. Did you feel that Chad Curtis, when he got mad after seeing Jeter and A-Rod talking, did you feel like he had a point, or was he totally off?
No, I think he had a point. I think you can save that to after the game. You know what I mean? Like, because you don't know, because it's not like Jeter and A-Rod were involved in all that stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, so, which I understand. Like, you don't want these guys getting hurt, but if baseball is like that too, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it has those like old school, historical kind of like things that you need to do as a team and as players, and there's some things that you can't just those unwritten rules that you can't just kind of break. And I felt like. You just can't do that on the field, especially. It's not like they was just like dugouts came out and like, and much didn't really happen. It was like you mentioned, it was a brawl. Like it was some punches thrown, and it was some guys who were really really upset. And I give Chad Curtis credit, like for him going to Jeter and letting him know, that you can't do that. Like, and you can see it still pisses Jeter off when you talk about that.
Yeah, well, because I do agree. Like so. Where Chad Curtis was wrong, and I can see Jeter's point, is bringing it up after the game's over in front of the media.
Right.
Like, yeah, that you don't do that. So that's to me where Chad Curtis is wrong for that. And Chad Curtis has a lot of stuff with him that is not good. Yep. So no, I'm not here to bash him, but it's just y'all can look it up. It's not good stuff on Chad Curtis in a lot of ways, but. Everything else in this case, besides waiting for the media to come in, I agree with Chad Curtis because I honestly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jose, I feel like Chad Curtis was also in the middle of it.
Right.
Like he was like, so he wasn't even like on the outside. And to me, the baseball rules, like you said, are the baseball rules. But I don't care who you are. I know for me, I'm gonna look at you sideways a little bit if I'm on the outside and I see you doing that. But if I'm in the middle of it, like getting haymakers hit upon me and throwing haymakers, and I see that, I'm doubly pissed.
Yeah.
Like, so I can't blame him. And ain't nobody perfect, right? But Jeter and A-Rod, they're wrong in my opinion for that. You can't do that in a bad brawl, and then you're in there like, not just even talking, but they were laughing and joking. Like, it was, anyone could see that clip and know they're joking around. Right. You can't do that.
Nah, you can't. In sports and anything else, you know what I'm saying? Like you gotta just wait and just even in the middle, like at the end. I mean, like not in the middle, at the end of it, where you're like right next to the guy. You're like, I'll talk to you later, dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's just I'm out. Like and you gotta you can't do that. Like you just there's certain things that in sports that not that you can't do. Like friends are friends, but it's just for the team environment, you gotta separate that sometimes.
Now you're my boy and all that. Like if we were playing and not Major League Baseball, like a men's baseball league or something, just for fun. And because I've seen it happen in these like men's baseball, softball leagues where it gets heated, and it's like you're on one team, on the other team, and we do, we've worked together with friends, we do a podcast, and there's a brawl, and we're out in the middle of it. I'm gonna look at you like, yo, we'll talk about that. I'll call you later. Like, yo, this is crazy, right? I'm not gonna be like, yo, man, blah 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 blah. So you want to talk about Jeter for the next episode? Like, you can't do that after like a brawl. Like, I can't blame you. Like, if my team is like, what are you doing? And even if I say he's my friend, like, yeah, you don't do that there. Like, I might give you the line, like, yo, I'll talk to you later, man. Like, this is crazy. Yeah. Like, and I know you wouldn't be like, you weren't talking to me now. You would get it.
You give them a nod, like,
yeah, like,
you know what I mean.
Like, you can't, like, cause I can't lie. If I'm Chad, I'm surprised more people did not, and I wonder if more. Chad Curtis was not liked in the locker room,
and Jeter hyped that up a little bit too.
Yes,
you know,
and Posada did a little bit, like. So I wonder if it's like if another teammate who was a little bit more, if David Cone brought it up.
Right.
With other teammates kind of back. Because, they had those old... And Jeter typically is an old school. Baseball is done a certain way. That Yankee dynasty is filled with guys... Paul O'Neill, David Cone. These are guys, they're by the book, like the baseball code. Like, Don Zimmer, even the bit, like, they're lifers who are like, you just do it
baseball lifers. Way. Yep, that's a good way to put it.
So, like... I can't. Other people had to have been upset with that, in my opinion.
Yeah, but they were probably scared to speak up on it, because again, like then afterwards, people talk about did Jeter have say in getting Chad Curtis? You know what I mean? Like he was out of there, and it's like he was like, if I had that much power, I'd have had an extension. Da da da. Come on, dude, you had that much power. Like let's be very honest. And if George Steinbrenner or whoever comes to you and goes, look, do you want this guy out of here? And you say, yeah, he's going to be out of here. You know what I mean? Like, so I didn't like that either. That comment by Jeter after that, like after they talked about that. But like, hey, like, you know what I mean? Like, if he would have said, look, I wasn't mad that he was gone, then that's cool. Like, you know what I mean? But
it's a cop out.
Yeah.
Every coaches and athletes always do that, where it's like, it's the whole like Nick Saban. I have not talked to Alabama. It's like, okay, yeah, you haven't. Your agent is talking for you to Alabama. Right. Like, all right, so you're you're using like legalities to get out of it. So I don't have that power. No, you didn't, baby, go to Cashman and George and say, he goes or I go. But they're not dumb. They saw this, and if they're like, oh, our star is not getting along with this role player,
right?
Who is also annoying other guys in the locker room too, like, do you want to get him out of here? And it's like maybe his agent said it, or he's just like, I wouldn't be upset if he goes,
or he doesn't want to play there. Maybe he's like, oh, get me the hell out of here, man. You know what I mean? Like,
right. So it's like you maybe weren't the only person, but you had part in it. And guess what? Especially seeing what Chad Curtis did afterwards and who he was even at that time, I'm not knocking you. But don't do that, like, slippery thing here. Like, you had a lot of pull in that Yankee franchise for all those years.
Yeah, and, and again, I felt like even Posada, like, adding to that, it was just like a homie thing. Like, I'm going to look out for you. I'm going to, like, add to that, too. And I was just like, it was, like, too much of that. You know what I mean? For a guy who, it's not like it was, say it was Bernie Williams that would have did that. You know what I mean? Like, it was that would have been a much bigger deal. But it's a role player, utility player. He was an average baseball player. Let's be real. He had a couple okay seasons, but he was an average player. And again, like average players, you do things like that, you're going to be gone, and that's just how it is.
No, for sure. I do like the setup a little bit. I think we're going to get more, but episodes 3 and 4 set up the rise of the Yankee Red Sox rivalry. And, Howard Bryant said it. I guess it had to be episode 4, and there's a build up to it. I like the build up that 3 had, where it's like in 99, Yankees, there's that old, Yankees Red Sox, that historic, but in that moment, Yankees fans didn't give a crap about the
No.
Red Sox. They weren't threatened by them. And I like that that's in 3, but in 4 you get to 0-2. The definitely by 0-3, they're a threat.
Oh yeah,
and they're looking at each other.
They're possibly even like a better team at that point.
Yes, and I like that build up, and I say all this because when Howard Bryant said it in episode 4, where he's like that Yankees Red Sox is like pretty much like the baseball, like the best moment in his baseball lifetime, and I'm like, man, that's strong.
That is strong.
But I'm like, I think I got to agree.
Yeah,
I think I got to agree.
It's some amazing baseball. You know what I mean? Like, because if I tell you, Jeremy, pick 10 guys, right, from the 2000s on, right, they like were the best players in the league. This rivalry has like 4 or 5 of those guys in there. You know what I mean? Like, and it's just, I mean, if you go pitcher and like everyday players, like they're going to have maybe more now if we add pitchers, but like both of these teams were super loaded. But the thing is, like they were so good, man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was like you had Jeter, you had like Bernie, you had all the Posada, all these guys, and on the other side you got Manny, David Ortiz, these young guys who are starting to really come up and are in their primes. You got Pedro, like you got now they're getting free agents over there. Then you had their utility players, you know, who were really good players. You had Nomar there still, like. Both of these teams were so stacked, man, and I can understand why ESPN played every series like pretty much. It felt
hyped it up.
It felt like it. So to me, it was like force fed to me, like, you know what I mean, like Yankees Red Sox. So it made me like kind of like, well, fuck both of them teams, like, you know what I mean. But it was great baseball.
It made me love it, honestly, and you're so right. It got hyped up, but for those few years. It was amazing because you had American League Baseball at its like bet, like where a lot of runs being scored. There's this high powered offense. So then you had that, but then you were getting these Pedro Clemens matchups where you're like, well, that's a pitcher's duel. And one thing I've said, like in past episodes, like not about Jeter, but like past episodes we've done on the podcast, where a lot of times it's hard to have that perfect combination. And I think today's sports, especially certain sports, lacks it, where it's off-season interesting. You know, they're newspaper champs.
Right.
But when it comes to game-time action, it goes away. That rivalry is gone. This may be one of the best examples of, in the off-season and these free agent, these arms races, it was exciting. And then on the field, the regular season games, it felt like were always like
very important.
They were important. They were playoff atmosphere. You know, when they played in April, in May, and in July, like it was like, oh, it rose up, and then you knew in the playoffs it was just fireworks.
Yeah.
It may be, and especially for what happened, you know, and what we'll see obviously in future episodes. But people know what happened with the Red Sox finally getting them, and just brawls and throw, you know. Benches being cleared, it might be, for me, so far at least, the highlight of my baseball life. Like watching that, like it was that awesome.
Yeah, when he said that, and it's somebody, Howard Bryant, you know, we've talked about him on the show. You know, he's commenting on like stuff on Twitter on our stuff, and someone who I really respect. You know what I mean? Like he's deep with it, and I appreciate his opinion. And when he said that, I was like. It had me thinking, and I was like, man, like what was the best baseball I ever seen? And it's just like, oof, he might be right. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, those the thing is, it was like such a perfect like marriage. It was like two of the most historical teams of all time, right? Like those roots go deep into baseball, and you have two great cities. Right, like New York and baseball, great sports towns. Mm-hmm. You play in the Yankee Stadium. He's playing in Fenway. The backdrops are beautiful. Like, you know, like uniforms are great. Like it's just everything is like just made for TV and it's perfect. And it's in one side you have all these great players, and the other side you have all these great players. I honestly I love that Red Sox team for a little bit there because it had like such a Latin feel. Like their best players were all Latin players, and I get sucked into that real quick, you know what I mean, when it comes to baseball. But like it's just it was force fed to me like by ESPN, but I was watching. You know what I mean? Because in
Mm-hmm.
April, like you mentioned, April, it's like, oh, the first series, the Yankees Red Sox. It's like, oh shit, I gotta watch that. Like, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And it's like throughout the year, and it's like they're neck and neck, 1 and 2 in a division, and it was just must watch baseball either way. It was like, who's pitching? Oh man, Pedro's pitching tonight against Clemens. Oh, I'm watching that. Like, it was great.
And it's exciting also because, like you said, the personalities were there and like the atmospheres. So like the Yankees were very buttoned up, but the Red Sox with Manny and Big Papi and Damon. And I love those teams too.
Johnny Damon, I forgot about Johnny Damon.
Yeah, I love Damon and Millar and then they bring in Schilling when they bring him in 04, but they were just personality galore. And it was like, man, this is just an exciting group of guys. And it did feel a little more, because the rivalry had died out for so long, it felt like a natural reincarnation of it.
Right.
Which made it like special.
Like both sides were all in on that. You know what I mean? Like both sides. And I think it's 100% right. Like, and it's like that with a lot of rivalries. Like, you know, you can look at it from any city. You know, once a team starts dominating for years and years and years, it's dead. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you look at other teams and you're like, yeah, I don't like those teams and stuff like that. But once both those teams get pretty good, like that those fans, it kicks right up, man. It's just like it never left, you know. And you're right. Like some of those guys, man, on those teams were especially the Red Sox, were all personality. You know, you had Big Papi was everywhere. Manny was everywhere. You know what I mean? Like people were falling in love with Johnny Damon. You know, he had the beard going and all that. Like it was really, really cool. And I'm glad I was there to kind of witness all that, you know, because again, like we were talking, and a couple of those series we were talking before we jumped on, it was like a couple of those series that I forgot that were so great, which is 03, this 03 series it was such a great, one of the best baseball series I've ever seen.
Yeah, and I never forget 03.
Right.
I remember where I was when I was watching both games, because the highlight games are 3 and 7.
Yep.
So I remember where I was watching Game 3, and I was at another sport. I was at a college football game. You know, it was Temple, but it was at Lincoln Financial Field, and everybody left. I mean, Temple college football stinks at that time, especially. But everybody left the stands and went to the concourse because they had Game 3 Yankees Red Sox on, and we're all huddled around TVs. It's my first time in Lincoln Financial Field. It was for a Temple game, and we're watching this because of like the hype, but then when, you know, Pedro hits Kareem Garcia, everyone just knew, and then he's pointing at, you know, his head at him and Posada. Everyone just left the stands and watched the baseball game and forgot about the football game. Like, I'll never forget that. We were just hooked on it because it was Yankees Sox, it was Pedro Clemens, and it was a talk of the, and baseball to me has not had that since, honestly.
No, not even close. And they're still trying with these two teams. You know, it's done. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're two good teams always, you know, because, again, like, they have a lot of money to spend. And they're going to be relevant for a while, you know. But it all settled, to be honest, for me, with Pedro. You know what I mean? Like, and I don't know if it was after that game where he was quoting. He was like, yeah, Babe Ruth comes up, I'll be in his ass, too. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know,
in the ass,
yeah. He sparked it all. He was a great player and can back up all the shit that he was talking. And you talked about it, you know, on our 99 Pedro episode, check the archives, where you were saying he was dominating the Yankees. You know what I mean? Like for a while there. And, you know, we talked about who's your daddy and all that game. But, you know, Pedro was dominating most of these games and he was able to talk that shit, you know. And I've seen him on Rich Eisen's show, and you know they would talk about the '99 season, and he was saying like he was pointing to his head. He wasn't pointing like that. He was head hunting. He was saying he was like smarter than that, and he was like, all these people think I was saying I'm going to beat him in his head, and he was like, I wasn't saying that, and I was like, I thought he was saying that, and that made it even better. You know what I mean for me? So it's so many stories with these two teams. It's just great.
It is awesome, and I do think you're right. Pedro was the real, because the Nomar Jeter thing was there. Pedro was the spark. What sent it over the edge was, and I wanted to ask you this: A-Rod jilting, pretty much going to the Red Sox, jilting them and going to the Yankees. But what I didn't realize, and maybe you did, I didn't know that if he went to the Red Sox, it was going to be A-Rod for Manny.
For Manny, yeah.
And how do you feel like about that trade? If that would have happened?
I don't. I have mixed feelings on that, because I think if you insert A-Rod into this, man, like it takes this to another level, because again, you're talking about Manny Ramirez at that point was the best right-handed hitter in the league. He's an all-time great, and I understand, you got some steroid use there. Like I get it, and he's not going to be in the Hall of Fame, but he was a great player. You know what I'm saying? Like he was one of my favorite players. He was a great hitter. But like if you add A-Rod into that, man, like I think it takes this rivalry to another level. Now you have that storyline with Jeter, A-Rod, and on this, oh my God, man. Like, and if A-Rod's doing stuff and like hitting home runs and like key moments but I also think you're all going to also elevate A-Rod in his career because if you put him in Boston against the Yankees and he has big moments, playoff moments, A-Rod is he's climbing that all-time ladder a whole lot faster.
That's what I wonder. Do you think because when A-Rod goes to New York, for a while he has playoff woes.
Right.
It's not until really 2009 that he kind of shatters it a little bit, but there's that pressure. He's with the Yankees, the whole him and Derek thing. Do you think if he's in Boston in playoff time, he plays looser? Could he have handled that other side of it where it's like, can we beat this curse, this 80-something, want to be in 86 years? Like, do you think like he would have stepped? To me, what helped the Red Sox get over the hump was they were so loose. They didn't care.
Yeah.
They were just, Manny, Poppy, Millar. They bring in Schilling, who he was a guy who did win it. So he had a little bit of that, but like they were just a loose bunch. A-Rod to me, especially once he got that contract, he was great, but he never was loose.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, would he become loose or would he bring that uptightness to Boston?
Oh, that uptightness is there. I also think, I don't know if they win that first one as soon with A-Rod. You know what I mean?
In 04?
In 04. I don't know if they win that because, Manny was a big part of that team. And one thing I would say about Manny, he was clutch. You know what I'm saying? Like, he had big moments. He had big home runs, big RBIs, man. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know if A-Rod's doing that. Now, on the long run, A-Rod's obviously a much better player, but, and they may have more success. But Manny was in a lot of those moments. It was Manny Ramirez doing some damage, him and Big Papi especially. So I don't know if they have the same success, but again, the storylines would have been through the roof, man. With those, if he's there,
I think drama wise,
right,
it's way more exciting. I do think the Red Sox are lucky that A-Rod went to the Yankees. I think the team would not have
right.
run that we've seen him on does not happen because that's what's fun to me about all this. And as you get older and then like just from being a sports fan, getting older and doing the show, the team building thing, when you see a trade, and a lot of times we think trade, we just as fans look at it talent for talent. And that's part of it. But it's also like GMs, people, they're looking at who fits well with this team, who fits
right.
well in the locker room, morale. And I think, player to player, even though Manny's one of the great right-handed hitters, they both got PEDs with them.
Right.
But player to player, I'm going to take A-Rod, like career-wise. But who fit the Red Sox better? Manny Ramirez, no question.
Easily.
And being down 3-0 in the 04 ALCS, and I know Big Papi got the big hits. If you take out Manny and his looseness, and you fill in A-Rod's, his ass is you can't get a blade of grass up there. He's going to be that tight because he's going to hear it. Oh, A-Rod's going to, and they would say that. The media would have been, he leaves Texas, got the biggest contract in sports history at the time. A-Rod's going to save. He's going to end the curse of the Bambino. Oof. Now look, they're down 3-0. They bring him in. They're down 3-0. They're going to get swept. They never got swept before.
He's hitting 210. You know what I mean? Like 2 RBIs.
Because we saw in that, to the flip side, when they were up 3-0, A-Rod looked good. When that lead started getting cut down, A-Rod started getting real tight.
Yeah.
Couldn't get a blade of grass up there. And he started, he smacked the ball out of Bronson Arroyo's hand and doing
It's very
dumb stuff.
frustrated. Yeah.
Yeah, like A-Rod. So I just think, like, for the Red Sox, it's a blessing that deal did not go through.
No, I agree with you 100%. Now, as a fan, like, of none of those two teams, I would have loved to have seen it. You know what I mean?
For sure.
But I agree. I'm glad it didn't happen because I feel like the relationship with, like, Manny, Big Papi, Pedro, like, all of that is huge, is a huge part of, like, what happened with Boston and what that turned into. And, them winning a couple championships there and that stretch run. But I think without Manny, you're removing that. And maybe, hey, Big Papi goes, you know what? I don't want to be here that long. You know what I'm saying? I'm out of here too. Like, you know what I'm saying? Because you play with guys like that where you can really relate to the same country and all that stuff. It can make you want to stay places. You know what I'm saying? Like, but if they leave and you're like, you know what? Like, why would I don't want to be here. Like, I'm out of here too. Like, you know what I'm saying? So it would have been super interesting. That had my wheels spinning too. Because I also didn't know it was for Manny straight up. I don't even know if I make that trade, to be honest, if I'm Texas, but, he wanted out. So, you know what I'm saying? But the crazy part is, like, it was done. That deal was done. You know what I mean? And if you didn't watch the episode, like, and you hear it all the time, you heard it with James Harden recently for the Sixers. It's like when the player starts to give away money and take less money to help a team or whatever, what the case may be, the union kind of jumps in and wants to stop that. That's exactly what happened in this situation. A-Rod, I can't remember the number. I don't know if you have the number, the figure, but he was giving up a lot of money, and the union stepped in and stopped the trade because, again, they didn't want A-Rod leaving all that money on the table. Because, again, what happens is it hurts future players and future contracts, things like that, which I get, like, as a union. But, man, it was a done deal.
It was, and it stinks for. Like, it would have been, I felt for Boston in that time.
Yeah, me too.
Like, not only did he, like, jilt you at the altar, but he goes to the Yankees, your biggest rival, so it's like, come on. So it's like, I do get it, but it worked out great.
Because at the time, I had no idea it was because of the union and all that stuff. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I just thought he kind of, like, changed his mind there. And maybe that information was probably out. I just didn't know it. But
yeah, I remember it being out that the union didn't like it. I didn't know they had that much sway.
Right. Me too.
So I knew that the union was not happy about it. I remember that. Like, that was a big deal for that reason. I didn't know that was the reason that it got stopped.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. And I was just like, wow, like, that's the reason why this trade that I was like, man, I wish it would have happened, never happened. That's a crazy reason for it not to happen. But again, I do understand where they're coming from, but I agree. I didn't know they had that much pull.
No, and I think it's setting up. I know we're gonna see it later, but for what happens in 04. Any other highlights from these two episodes? I know for me, I think for one more, at least I want to say is interesting kind of seeing them talk about the Jeter-Steinbrenner relationship.
Right.
And I remember the big deal about the commercial, the American Express, and Steinbrenner calling him out in the press. It's weird because sometimes I'm trying to picture when Jeter's saying, like, he gets called into the offices in Tampa, or I think it was in Tampa or New York. I think it was in Tampa. Yeah. And, like, he's yelling back at George. I can see George Steinbrenner yelling. It's very hard for me to see Derek Jeter yelling, but it's kind of cool, like, to see, like, he has fire in him. You know what I mean? Like, like, you don't see it. Like, he has it kind of. He's a competitor, but, like, you're like, where's that fire at? So it's kind of cool to hear that, like, because Steinbrenner was, like, he was the most powerful owner in sports.
Right.
So it was cool to see, like, he had that. So that dynamic is very interesting, what you saw in episode 4 with those two, for me at least.
Yeah, for me with episode 4 was a couple other things that I was just like, the one where A-Rod was talking when they were interviewing A-Rod and talking to him about like playing shortstop or third base, and he was like, "No, I told him if you move me to shortstop, trade me to Texas." And I was like, "You did not say that." Like, you know what I mean? Like, I know you didn't say that. Like, I can say that wholeheartedly. I know you did not say that. You wanted to play shortstop. You would have taken that position from Jeter if possible. You would have had no problem doing that. Again, like I know we've talked about A-Rod a lot here, but he was a big part of these 2 episodes. That for me, again, that was towards the end of episode 4. He lost me again there. And the Randy Levine stuff after Game 7, when he was talking all this shit to Boston, talking about 1918 bitches and all this stuff, and that I didn't know. Obviously, I didn't know that happened, you know. But then again, like for me, it was like, man, like karma came back and got dumb for that stuff. Like, and this is why you don't do that, because again, that was in 03 and 04. We know what happens. They come back from 3-0, one of the best comebacks of all time, and it's like I was like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you talk that shit, you know what I'm saying? Teams don't forget that stuff, man. You know, and I'm not saying the Red Sox use that as motivation, but I'm sure it was a part of it too. So those 2 things for me were kind of stuck out as well in episode 4. But to go back to what we talked about at the beginning, Jeremy, man, I'm really enjoying this. Like, I know after episode 2, I was like in my shit a little bit about Jeter, but I'm just really digging like all these stories, and the A-Rod stuff for me was really interesting, and the A-Rod stuff had me hooked right away. And then the Boston thing, I was done. Like, I was like, yeah, give me all of that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I am enjoying it. I'm enjoying it more than I thought I would, honestly. You know, from the time I remember when they promoted, like, I don't know, a year or 2 ago, like, there's going to be a 7-part thing on Jeter. I was like, 7 parts? I'm not going to lie. I was like,
that's
you can't do like an hour and a half doc and it'd be done? Like, 2 hours even and be done with it? Like, I'm like, 7 parts, but I'm gladly staying corrected. Standing corrected that A-Rod being such a big part of it. I knew like him coming to the Yankees was a big deal, but like really seeing how closely their careers are aligned, I never thought. I thought early on, and then but it shows like throughout this whole time they were always aligned together. So I'll be honest, I've watched these 2 a few times. So for me, episode 3, I always was like, yeah, that's an A- episode. 4, I kind of felt like was maybe a place filler to get the 5, but rewatching them and even having this conversation with you, like, it's what really carried 4 for me was them retouching the Boston rivalry,
right,
and now showing that Boston got on their level. And now, like, you gotta respect, like, it's a rivalry. And you're right, like, I remember 03's, to me, 04 is so great, and so many moments, but 03, you know, Boone's home run is classic. That's a classic memory.
Yeah.
What happened with Pedro and everything, and Grady Little is all classic. So those are 2 of the most infamous series in baseball history, back-to-back years.
Right.
So 4 with that, because you brought the Randy Levine story, even that becomes an A- for me too. Like that it was close to being a filler, but that kind of brought it where it had me hooked again. Where I'm like, yeah, like I want a Yankees Red Sox game right now. Like, I'm hyped for it.
Yeah. I almost rewatched one of those 03 games, and just cause of that. But when I watched, I was telling you earlier, I had just gotten back from vacation. I was like, I was done. You know what I'm saying? So I just kind of wanted to lounge and watch some good stuff, and I did. You know what I'm saying? Like, the filler stuff for me was like the Marlin stuff. You know what I mean? Like that, all that. You know, like I was just like, I hated that Marlins team. Like, with such a passion. You know, because it was such. Watching them, you knew it was like over next year. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, and it was just like these dudes are going to get a championship soon, man. And my team hasn't won a championship in 900 years, you know. So
I hated both Marlins World Series teams.
Right. So I know I love Gary Sheffield. Gary Sheffield was a great player, but
I mean, I respect him. I hate both.
Yeah.
97 and 03. Because they felt like it was not. It was for that year. They were going to break up. I felt like those fans didn't really care. They caught on. They jumped in it later. and then like the next year the fans didn't show up,
Right.
and it just felt like not real,
Yeah.
almost like
Yeah.
So
But yeah, like
hated both those teams.
yeah, you go. I go with an A- as well for both episodes. I think for me, episode 4 was the one that really had me, man. Again, because once I couldn't wait for this Red Sox stuff to come up, and it just brought back a lot of emotions and stuff for me that I was just like, man, like this was great. You know what I'm saying? And I miss that baseball. You know what I'm saying? Like I really, really do. I don't really feel that right now with any of these teams. You know, I know in the West Coast you got the Dodgers, Padres, like they're going at it. That seems like really cool. But like we talked about earlier with the West Coast thing, like those games at 10:30. I'm 42 years old. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not staying up to one
that,
watching
but
that.
there's no faces of the game.
Right.
You know, we've lost that. You know, Mike Trout is generational. Mike Trout can go into a lot of malls and people wouldn't know who he was.
I know. It's sad, you know. I just feel, and the Padres, we were talking about. I was talking about this Red Sox team, like what the Padres. I don't know we're going like super off the target, but what the Padres are doing now is something kind of similar to what Boston was doing, and you know, getting all these young Latin players in their prime, and you know, our Padres are a big team in the Latin community right now, and now that you know they just traded, we're doing this episode August 2nd, MLB trade deadline. They just get Juan Soto, so that's going to be a team like a lot of people are going to be involved with or just really rooting for because again, like I'll say a lot of Latin people will be rooting for them because of that flavor, that big time flavor that I got from this Boston team in the late 90s, early 2000s. So it's I miss this baseball there. I mean, I need it, man, and hopefully we get some good playoff stuff coming this season.
Absolutely. So we'll be back later this week where we're recapping on our YouTube channel episode 5. So please tell everybody if you haven't. I feel like ESPN's playing it enough,
Right.
but this is a really good docuseries. The Captain has been really good. So far, the first 4 episodes have been on point. And we'll keep it real. If they fade off in any of the next 3 episodes, we're going to be on them. But right now, honest opinion from both of us is we're enjoying it. It's really good. Really, it's well done. So watch The Captain if you haven't or you want to get caught up. And then watch our recaps and hear what we say about it at our YouTube channel, Bigger Than the Game with Jeremy and Jose. So for the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Jose Ruiz, I'm Jeremy Dove. Thank you guys for watching us. Take care.
Peace.